I'm Chris O'Connor, I'm a writer and I co-host the Mentality podcast, which is all about promoting better mental health habits in men.
So I am Jake Thompson, I'm an actor and a writer. I'm on the Artist in Residence course on Bloomin Buds, and we're taking my debut play to the Edinburgh Fringe later in the year.
We did the Zoom workshop, which kind of mirrored the workshop we did earlier, but looking at masculinity and the way men deal with things. And I had a really interesting chat with Jenny where we talked about the role of testosterone in men, and she mentioned it almost like mirroring the role of the menopause in older women, and there's like a chemical reaction going on in the body that you might not understand why you're going through it. And it made me think differently about how testosterone affects young men, and perhaps they're going through something they can't quite control, which in a way can explain their behaviours and some of the ways they kind of act out. And it kind of changed my thinking of less judging them badly as maybe feeling a bit sorry for what they're going through, and maybe understanding far more why they end up doing things which result in joining gangs or getting involved in violence. So I kind of reframed my thinking on that topic.
I thought when we were doing the statements and how far we agreed or disagreed, that was really impactful, the way we all had maybe slightly differing opinions. We were all on a slightly different place on the scale, but then we opened up the conversation as to why we felt like that. I felt like that had a really good impact. I enjoyed that part a lot, yeah. I
think one of the topics which brought the most conversation was when we talked about whether mental health is talked about too much, because I think most of us agree, for men, 5 years ago there was hardly any conversation around it, and now it actually is far more open. But I think we all recognise that talking about it isn't enough, and that if politicians are talking about it, we want to see what they're doing about it. If people are talking about it, we want to see what actions they're taking on it. And I know from my own personal experience with OCD and things, talking about it actually could become a bit of a kind of a negative habit, where I'd think that was enough, and it actually wasn't. I needed to deal with the root causes. So we kind of all went back and forth, because obviously it's really important to talk about it, but that's not the only thing we need.
I think it was in that session, all the conversations in that little section that we did, they all flowed quite naturally, and we all respected each other's opinions and let each other just get our opinions out. I thought the specific one, the question about a normal brain, and how we were all kind of on a slightly different place on the scale, and it was interesting seeing certain people's perspective on it, from like how their own personal circumstances affected their opinion. I took a lot from that. It kind of made me think about it in a different way from what I gave as my answer at first. I liked that one. Yeah.
It's a bit of a cliche, but I still think it holds true, and it's the idea of what most young men think a man should be. I think if you think about the male role models such as James Bond or people in films, often they're quite stoic, and I think stoicism has its place, but often they don't really talk about things affecting them and their emotions. I think young men still aspire to that they shouldn't let things affect them. So therefore they might think, oh, it's all right for other people, but not for me. So I think that is changing, but I still think that's the biggest thing holding people back.
I think it's that general stigma. It gets talked about a lot, and it's kind of like we were saying about do we talk too much, and certain people do, certain people don't, but it's one of those, it's about taking the action. So we can say it until we're blue in the face, we need to break the stigma, but when it comes down to it, there is still kind of that stigma there. I think it's down to the kind of masculinity, the testosterone based thing, like we were just saying about how groups of lads will tend to take the piss out of each other rather than compliment each other, but they all kind of know that is a compliment, that is how they kind of get on. But I think it's all just to do with that. It's that kind of stigma. It's like when you're just so used to taking the piss out of each other, how do you kind of bridge that, make that conversation happen to make it serious?
It's something I already knew, but kind of lapsed, and on one of the Zoom workshops, a few people talked about how doing physical things help with their mental health. And in lockdown, I actually got into a really good habit of doing, because there was no life didn't get in the way, I was really good at scheduling when I went for a run and things like that. But as life's kind of seeped back in, it's all gone out the window again. And I had a small knee injury recently, so I noticed my mood was low, and my partner actually pointed out that, well, you're not actually doing anything, so naturally you're not going to be creating those kind of good feel-good things. So now I'm feeling a bit better, and hearing the Zooms, I was like, I have to just make it important that if I haven't done anything in a day or two, I've got to go out for a walk or a jog or something. And yeah, I've definitely taken that for today, and I kind of knew it anyway, but it's just brought it back home.
I think it's just consciously doing well-being activities. Like, I do things, like I said it on the Zoom call session, it's like when I do something because I enjoy it, I never like consciously think, right, I'm doing this for the sake of my mental health. I just do it, and it works, but I want to try and start consciously thinking about my own mental health and doing things, even if it's just doing the same things. Like my habits might not change too much, but just actually consciously thinking about my own mental health and taking steps towards the well-being activities. Yeah.